What if I told you that the last time you sabotaged a major success at work or, picked a completely pointless fight with your partner, your brain was actually functioning perfectly?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds totally backwards, but it is true.
Right. Today, we're jumping into a deep dive on this honestly terrifying reality that human beings will actively choose familiar misery over unfamiliar happiness. And we do it by playing these invisible, highly structured psychological games.
We really do. We play them all day long without even noticing.
Exactly. So we're looking at the groundbreaking framework developed by Dr. Eric Berne, specifically his core concepts from transactional analysis. Our mission today is basically to pull back the curtain on this hidden architecture of human interaction.
Which is so crucial because before Byrne came along in the 1950s and 60s, psychiatry was just completely dominated by Freud, right?
Right, the whole psychoanalysis thing.
Exactly, where it was all about digging around inside the unconscious mind.
Hmm.
But Berner, well, he looked at it completely differently. He argued that you can actually see a person's internal world just by looking at their external transactions,
Mm-hmm.
like how they interact with the barista or their spouse or their boss.
Just observing the actual behavior in the real world.
Right. So we aren't just giving you communication tips today. We are decoding the literal neurological scripts that run your self-esteem, your career, your relationships.
Because if you don't understand these mechanics, you're essentially flying blind through a minefield.
Totally flying blind.
So let's start with this word game, because word game is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, I think.
It really is.
Like when we think of games, we think of chess or basketball, activities where everyone agrees on the rules, there's a clear winner. But Berner's games, they don't sound fun at all.
No, they are definitely not recreation.
Yeah, they sound like covert operations. So what exactly is a game when we're talking about a conversation?
Well, Byrne's definition totally subverts how we normally use that word. A psychological game, in this context, is this ongoing series of ulterior transactions that progress to a really predictable outcome.
Okay, wait, ulterior transactions, break that down for me.
Basically, most conversations are not just straightforward exchanges of facts. They operate on two distinct levels at the exact same time. You have the social level, which is the actual words coming out of your mouth.
Right.
And then you have the psychological level, which is the hidden emotional payload you're delivering under those words.
Yeah. Okay, so on the social level, I might just be asking you, hey, how do I get to the train station?
Right. A simple question.
But on the psychological level, my tone or my posture might be screaming, I am helpless, you need to take care of me. Or maybe the opposite, like, I bet you don't even know where the station is, you idiot.
Yes, exactly. The words are really just a carrier wave for the actual transaction happening underneath.
Wow. Okay,
Yep.
that makes a lot of sense.
Let's look at a classic office dynamic, because I think it makes this really clear. Imagine a boss calls an employee in, sits them down, and says, I only want what is best for you.
Which sounds great on paper.
Right. The social level vocabulary is super nurturing. It sounds like mentorship. But let's look at the psychological level. The boss's tone is clipped. Their body language is completely rigid. And, maybe they have a history of micromanaging.
Oh, I had that boss.
We all have.
Yeah.
So the hidden message, the actual transaction being delivered, is not about mentorship at all. It is pure control. It means you need to do exactly what I say or I will fire you.
Right. And the crazy thing is the transaction only finishes when the employee responds. So if the employee just nods and goes, thank you so much, I really appreciate that, while internally their stomach is in knots and they feel totally resentful, the game worked.
Exactly. The game was played perfectly. The message of control and the response of fear were never spoken out loud, but both people understood it perfectly.
But wait, let me push back a little. Isn't this just, reading body language? Like, we all know tone of voice matters.
It goes so much deeper than just reading body language, mainly because of how our brains actually process this conflicting data.
Yeah.
You have to remember, we evolved to be highly attuned threat detection machines.
Right, survival of the fittest.
Yeah, early humans had to know the true intentions of their tribe to survive. So when that boss says, I want what's best for you, your auditory cortex processes the words and it categorizes them as safe.
Okay.
But simultaneously, your amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, is processing the rigid posture, the cold tone, the historical context, and it registers a massive threat.
So your brain is literally getting two opposite signals at the same time.
Exactly. It creates massive cognitive dissonance. Your brain screams, hey, the data does not match the feeling here, and it cannot let it go because it's trying to solve a survival puzzle.
Oh, wow. So that is why you find yourself staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, just absolutely fuming over a conversation that, if you read a transcript of it, sounded totally polite.
Yes, your amygdala is still trying to process the psychological threat that the social words tried to cover up.
It really makes me think of, like, sitting down to play a board game with your friends, but everyone is secretly using a different rule book.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, like you think you're playing chess, so you're making logical moves on the board, but the guy across from you is playing Monopoly and just trying to emotionally bankrupt you, and someone else is playing Uno.
Right, and it's total chaos.
And the worst part is, no one is allowed to admit they're playing different games. So you make a logical chess move, and your friend just screams Uno and flips the table. You walk away feeling insane because you thought you were both just playing chess.
And the real tragedy is that every single person at that table thinks their specific rule book is the objective reality of the universe.
That is wild.
It is. And to understand how we even get to that chaotic table, we have to look at the players themselves. Because Berne proposed that the human personality is not just one unified thing.
Okay, so what is it?
He argued that inside each of us, there are 3 distinct ego states, and we shift between them rapidly all day long. They are the parent, the adult, and the child.
Okay, so Berne came up with this in the 60s. But, modern therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, they would probably say, we aren't literally shifting into a child state. We're just having a cognitive distortion or an emotional flashback. Does this old model actually hold up to modern neuroscience?
It actually holds up remarkably well when you map it onto the brain. These aren't just cute poetic metaphors. Berne observed actual physical shifts in his patients.
Like what kind of shifts?
Well, he'd be talking to a highly successful 40-year-old executive, and suddenly the patient would shift into a different state. Their vocabulary would shrink, their posture would completely slump, even the pitch of their voice would get higher.
Just literally acting like a kid.
Exactly. And neurologically, this child state maps really cleanly onto the limbic system, the emotional center, when it overrides the prefrontal cortex.
Oh, interesting.
And the adult state represents the prefrontal cortex actually staying online and regulating that emotion, while the parent state operates like these deeply ingrained neural pathways we formed from mirror neurons when we were toddlers.
Okay, so let's break down each of these pathways, maybe starting with the parent state. What does that actually look like?
So the parent ego state, technically called the exteropsyche, is basically a massive archive of unedited recordings in your brain.
Recordings of what?
Of the authority figures from your first 5 years of life, usually your actual parents. A child just absorbs their behaviors, their prejudices, their rules, completely unfiltered.
Okay, so it's the part of the mind that sets rules and deals in absolutes.
Yes. The vocabulary of the parent state is full of words like always, never, should, must.
So when I have that internal monologue that's just berating me, going, yeah, you're being so lazy, you should be working twice as hard right now. Or if I snap at my partner for leaving a dish in the sink and I use the exact same exasperated sigh my dad used to use.
Yep, that is it.
That's my parent state taking over the executive function. I've literally just become the authority figure from my childhood.
You basically downloaded their software when you were 3, and now you're running it as your own operating system.
That is terrifying.
It can be, but I should mention, the parent state isn't only critical, there's also the nurturing parent state. That's the part of you that instinctively knows how to hug a crying friend or, put a Band-Aid on a scraped knee.
Oh, okay, so it's not all bad.
Right, but whether it's critical or nurturing, the key is that it is a reactive state based entirely on the past. It's not analyzing the present moment.
Got it. Which I guess brings us to the adult state, and this sounds like what you mentioned earlier, the prefrontal cortex in action.
Precisely. The adult ego state, or the neo-psyche, is your data processing computer. It is anchored firmly in the present moment.
Oh, it's logical.
Very logical.
Huh.
It relies on observable facts and objective reality. The adult state doesn't judge things morally. It just computes the data.
Yeah.
It takes in what's happening right now, evaluates it without the bias of your childhood, and makes a rational choice.
So it's the state that actually reads the IKEA instructions before building the bookshelf, instead of just jamming pieces together and yelling when it breaks.
That is a perfect example.
Yeah.
And jamming the pieces together and throwing a tantrum that brings us directly to the third state, the child.
The archaeopsyche, right.
Exactly. This state contains all the raw impulses of an infant. But more importantly for adults, it's the state that reacts based on deep-seated, unresolved childhood emotions.
So it's not just crying and tantrums.
No, it houses our profound joy, our uninhibited creativity, our spontaneity. But yes, it also houses our feelings of terror, helplessness, and inadequacy.
Okay, let's ground this with a practical example so we can see these neural shifts happen in real time. Imagine a kid comes home from school, looks at their mom or dad, and says, I made a huge mistake on my math test today.
Okay, perfect scenario. Because how the caregiver responds to that will show you exactly which ego state is dominating their brain in that moment.
Right.
If the parent instantly snaps back, you always make mistakes. You never pay attention in class. That is the critical parent ego state.
Yeah, I hear the always and never in there.
Exactly. It's a rigid, judgmental reaction that completely shuts down any real communication. The caregiver's amygdala got triggered,
Yeah.
and they just defaulted to a learned script.
Okay, but what if they respond from that regulated prefrontal cortex adult state? What does that sound like?
It sounds totally different. The caregiver would probably take a breath, look at the kid, and say, I see you're upset. Tell me what happened. Which section was difficult?
Oh, wow, yeah. Night and day.
Right. There's no moral judgment there. The caregiver is fact-finding. They are present in the now, trying to solve the problem, rather than punishing the child just to alleviate their own anxiety about having a kid who struggles in math.
And the thing is, this dynamic doesn't just magically disappear when we turn 18, right? This dictates our lives every single day.
Every single day. If you look at the clinical data, when a 35-year-old is reacting to, say, a delayed email from their boss, they often aren't reacting as a 35-year-old adult.
Really? Who are they reacting as?
If they start spiraling and getting anxious, they're reacting as a terrified 8-year-old child who feels ignored and is expecting to be punished.
Oh, man.
This is where we see how trauma distorts time. The objective adult state would just compute the data. The boss hasn't replied in 4 hours. They're probably just in meetings. It has nothing to do with me.
Right. That's the logical conclusion.
But if that delay gives you a knot in your stomach and your internal monologue starts racing, saying, oh God, they hate my proposal, I'm going to get fired, I'm a fraud,
Then you've snapped into the child state.
instantly. The event is happening in 2026, but the emotional meaning you were assigning to it was locked in decades ago. You were basically reacting to a ghost.
Okay, wait, I want to challenge something here, though, because the way we're describing this, the child state sounds like a total liability at work, and the parent state sounds domineering and toxic. So shouldn't the goal just be to exist in the adult state 100% of the time? Like, shouldn't we all just want to be these highly regulated data computers?
I am so glad you asked that because that is the most common pitfall people face with this framework.
Really?
Absolutely. Think about it. A person operating 100% in the adult state would basically be a sociopathic robot.
Oh, well, that doesn't sound great.
No. They'd be incredibly efficient, sure, but entirely devoid of warmth, empathy, or joy. The goal of transactional analysis isn't to amputate the parent and child parts of yourself.
So what is the goal?
The goal is fluidity in context. If you are sitting on the floor playing with a puppy, or you're at a comedy club laughing until you literally cry, you need to be in an uninhibited child state. The adult state doesn't know how to play.
Oh, that makes sense. So dysfunction isn't about simply having a child state. It's about the states being mismatched to whatever the current reality is.
Exactly. Pathology happens when the child or parent state hijacks a situation that actually demands adult objectivity.
Like negotiating a raise.
Yes. If you're in a boardroom negotiating your salary, you desperately need your adult state online. But if the CEO's tone reminds you of your critical dad and your child state takes over,
You'll just shrink. You'll under-negotiate and walk away feeling totally resentful.
right, in that moment, when those ego states cross wires, that is exactly when a psychological game begins.
Which brings us right into the anatomy of the games themselves. And I really want to dissect the most famous game Berne identified, because I guarantee every single person listening right now has played this and been the victim of it.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's the game called Why Don't You? Yes, But.
Yes. Why don't you? Yes, but. Is the quintessential ulterior transaction. On the social level, it looks like two adults reasonably trying to solve a problem. But on the psychological level, it's a child desperately trying to prove a point to a parent.
Okay, let's walk through exactly how this works. Let's role play it a bit. Imagine a friend comes up to you over coffee and says, I am so miserable at my job. My manager is toxic. The hours are awful. I'm completely burning out.
So you, stepping into the helpful adult role, analyze the data and offer a logical fix. You say, well, why didn't you update your resume this weekend and call that recruiter we met?
And your friend instantly shoots it down. Yes, but the job market is totally dead in my industry right now. I'd never even get an interview.
Right, so you pivot. You try again. Okay, why don't you ask HR for a lateral transfer to a different team?
Yes, but HR is notoriously corrupt here. They would just tell my manager and make my life a living hell.
Okay, so why don't you just set a hard boundary and log off at 5:00 p.m. every single day?
Yes, but then I'll look like I'm not a team player and I'll be the first person they lay off.
And we can literally do this dance forever.
Right. Every single logical solution, the why don't you, gets met with this totally impenetrable counterargument, the yes but.
And eventually, the person giving the advice just hits a wall. You run out of ideas, you throw your hands up in the air, and you say, well, I guess you're just stuck then. I don't know what to tell you.
And you feel totally exhausted, frustrated, and completely drained. But the friend who came complaining in the first place, they actually feel a very specific, twisted kind of satisfaction.
Exactly. And that satisfaction is what Berne calls the payoff.
The payoff.
In every psychological game, the payoff is the ultimate goal. Now, logically, the payoff of asking for advice should be getting a solution. But in this game, solving the problem would ruin everything.
Wait, why?
Because the actual hidden objective of the game is for the player's child state to prove that their problem is uniquely, fundamentally unsolvable. By shooting down every single thing you suggest, they defeat the advice giver.
Oh, wow. So the internal monologue is like, look, see? My situation is impossible. Even you, with all your great ideas, can't save me.
Yes, they get to remain the unique victim of circumstance.
But this is where it gets deeply, deeply uncomfortable for me. Why on earth would the human brain actively fight to stay miserable? Like, what evolutionary mechanism overrides our basic instinct to avoid pain just so we can get some negative attention instead of a solution?
It is a huge paradox, and to answer it, we have to look at the concept of strokes.
Strokes, like physical strokes.
Sort of. A stroke is essentially a unit of human recognition. To understand how vital these are, you have to look at this very grim clinical history. Right after World War II, a psychoanalyst named Renee Spitz studied infants in orphanages.
Okay.
These babies had all their physical needs met. They were fed on a schedule, they were kept warm, they were kept in clean cribs, but they were entirely deprived of human touch, holding, and emotional interaction.
And the results were horrific, right?
Completely devastating. Even though they had food and shelter, these infants developed a condition called marasmus, which is severe failure to thrive. Their physical growth stunted, their mental development stopped, and a tragic number of them literally died.
Just from lack of interaction.
Yes. Spitz proved that human beings have a biological, neurological imperative for recognition. We physically need strokes to survive just as much as we need calories.
Okay, so a positive stroke would be a hug or a compliment or just someone looking you in the eyes and saying, hey, you did a really great job today. It regulates your whole nervous system.
Precisely. But here is the terrifying corollary to that rule.
Mm-hmm.
If a human being cannot get positive strokes, they will not simply accept having 0 strokes.
Because 0 strokes means death to the brain.
Exactly. Isolation, or being ignored, is processed by the brain as a literal survival threat. So if positive attention isn't on the menu, the subconscious will aggressively hunt down negative strokes.
Well,
We will provoke fights, we will play the victim, we will sabotage our own projects. Because to the human nervous system, a negative stroke is vastly superior to avoid. Being yelled at least proves that you exist.
that is just, it maps so perfectly onto modern digital communication. Like, look at the gamification of social media.
Oh, absolutely.
Those platforms are literal stroke delivery engines. And what gets the most engagement? Outrage. People will post the most inflammatory, horrible takes just to get ratioed and attacked in the comments.
Because 1,000 angry replies is a massive dopamine hit of negative strokes. It validates that they exist way more effectively than just being ignored.
It's the exact same mechanism.
It is. The tragedy of the payoff is that people will repeat these painful interpersonal patterns forever, because the human brain fundamentally prefers the safety of familiarity over the risk of happiness.
I really want to hover on that because that is the most counterintuitive concept in this whole deep dive. The brain prefers familiarity over happiness.
It sounds crazy, but it's true.
It's like if you train an AI on data where love always equals chaos and unpredictability, it's going to optimize for chaos when you deploy it in the real world. So if you grew up in a house where the only time your parents paid attention to you was when they were screaming at you, your neural pathways wire punishment and connection together.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward 20 years. You are in a relationship with a calm, supportive, emotionally available person.
Hmm.
Your adult state knows this is a great, healthy dynamic.
But your child state is freaking out.
Your limbic system starts to totally panic. The environment is way too quiet. The brain goes, wait, this isn't how connection works. Where's the yelling? When is the other shoe going to drop?
Uh-huh.
I am not safe here.
So what do? You pick a fight over absolutely nothing. You leave a passive-aggressive note on the counter. You subconsciously orchestrate some kind of betrayal.
You do whatever it takes to force your partner into a critical parent state so they will finally yell at you. And when they finally snap, your child state gets the payoff. Yes, the argument hurts, but you also feel this deep, soothing relief of the familiar. You get to tell yourself, I knew it. People always turn on me.
You validate the worldview. It's like emotional junk food.
Yes.
Like when you eat a huge plate of junk food, your prefrontal cortex knows you're going to feel lethargic and sick in an hour. But the second the salt and sugar hit your tongue, you get that massive familiar dopamine hit. Psychological games are just interpersonal junk food.
That is exactly what they are.
Playing, yes. But gives you that quick hit of validation. I am right. My life is impossible, even though it chronically starves you of the actual nutrients you need, which are genuine intimacy and actual solutions.
Exactly. And we really have to ask the ultimate question here. Where did these specific cravings even come from?
Right. Why does one person crave the negative stroke of being a victim, while someone else craves the negative stroke of being a tyrant?
Because these distinct patterns of self-sabotage aren't random. They are the execution of deeply embedded code.
Which brings us to the concept of life scripts, which really feels like the missing puzzle piece here. If the ego states are the hardware and the games are the software programs, then the life script is the master algorithm that dictates which programs run.
Perfect analogy.
So how exactly is a life script written?
A life script is an unconscious, comprehensive life plan. And the most startling part of Berne's theory is that this script is typically drafted, finalized, and sealed before a person reaches the age of 7.
Age 7.
Yes. It is built entirely on early childhood experiences, overt and covert messages from parents, and the profound emotional conclusions a very vulnerable child makes about the nature of existence.
So a kid is basically just a tiny, desperate data scientist.
Exactly. They are observing their environment, running constant experiments to figure out the rules of survival. They're asking these massive existential questions like, what do I have to do to get noticed? What gets me fed? Is the world safe or is it dangerous? Am I valuable or am I just a burden?
And because they don't have a developed prefrontal cortex to understand nuance, the conclusions they draw are totally absolute.
Right. And those conclusions form the life script. Once that script is locked in, the person will spend the rest of their life unconsciously bending reality, manipulating people, and playing games just to ensure that the real world matches the script they wrote when they were 5.
Okay, let's look at how this machine learning algorithm operates when we grow up. Take the pleaser script.
The pleaser script usually forms in an environment where a kid learns that their own needs, or their tears, are treated as a huge inconvenience by their parents.
Okay.
They learn through negative reinforcement that the only way to get positive strokes, or honestly, just to avoid anger, is to be perfectly compliant. They have to anticipate everyone's moods and keep everyone happy to neutralize the threat.
So they become these hyper-vigilant mood managers, and when they grow up, they don't lose that programming at all. They become the adult who literally cannot say no. They take on the workloads of 3 different people at the office, they stay in incredibly toxic relationships because they think they can fix their partner, and they just exist in this state of chronic burnout.
But they can't stop playing the role. Because their deeply embedded script dictates that if they ever stop pleasing others, if they set even one boundary, they will lose all love and be totally abandoned. The algorithm literally says, my right to exist is determined entirely by my utility to other people.
Wow. And then there's the failure script, which I honestly find even more insidious because it often hides behind this facade of high ambition.
Oh, absolutely. You see this in incredibly high achievers who constantly inexplicably stumble right before they cross the finish line.
How does that mechanism work?
Imagine a formative environment with constantly moving goalposts. A kid brings home a B, and they get interrogated about why it wasn't an A.
Right.
Then they bring home an A, and they're warned not to get arrogant about it. The child's internal data scientist concludes, no matter what I do, it is never enough. Therefore, I am inherently flawed, and I will inevitably fail.
That becomes the core algorithm.
Yes. So fast forward, this person is smart, talented, hardworking. They get to the very brink of massive success. They're up for the VP role, or they're about to marry someone wonderful, or their startup is getting funded, and then, suddenly, they blow it all up.
They send a totally inappropriate email to the board. Or they cheat on their partner. Or they literally just sleep through the most important meeting of their life.
Exactly, and why do they do it?
Why?
Because success represents an existential threat to the algorithm. If the life script says, I am a failure, and reality starts looking distinctly like success, the brain experiences unbearable cognitive dissonance.
The unfamiliarity of success actually feels like a loss of identity.
Exactly. So to alleviate that panic, the subconscious just grabs the steering wheel and drives the car straight into a ditch. They snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, and then they get the soothing payoff.
They get to say, see, I knew I'd ruin it. I always do. The script was right all along.
The script is preserved.
The tragedy of that is just staggering to me. Like, the biggest obstacle this person faces isn't the economy, it isn't bad luck, it's not their competitors, it's their own internal code.
We will fight tooth and nail to protect our scripts, even the ones that are actively destroying our health, because the predictability of a tragic script just feels safer than the chaos of an unscripted life.
It really forces this profound confrontation with yourself. You realize you are the author, the director, and the lead actor in a tragedy of your own making, and you had no idea you were even holding the pen.
It's a very heavy realization.
So, given that these scripts are neurologically embedded before age 7, what is the clinical pathway out? Are we just doomed to execute this flawed code until we die? How do we fire the director?
This is where Berne's framework transitions from diagnosis to actual liberation. We are not doomed, but we have to understand that you cannot change a pattern until you can observe it objectively. Awareness is the absolute prerequisite for rewriting the code.
Okay.
You have to learn how to drop the rope.
Let's get into the mechanics of dropping the rope. Because, like we said earlier, psychological games require 2 players. It's a tug of war.
Yes, exactly.
If you're standing in the mud, pulling on your end of the rope with all your might, and the other person suddenly just lets go, the game instantly ends. You literally can't play tug of war with empty space.
That's brilliant. If one person refuses to play their assigned role, the script collapses. And the mechanism for dropping the rope is deliberately shifting into your adult ego state.
Yeah.
You consciously choose to communicate based on present reality, instead of reacting from your historical child or parent state.
Let's dissect the exact syntax of doing this in a high-stress scenario, because it sounds easy, but it is incredibly hard in the moment. Let's look at a classic toxic loop between a couple.
Okay, let's hear it.
Partner A feels ignored because partner B is just mindlessly scrolling on their phone during dinner.
Right, so in a scripted game, partner A's amygdala triggers a threat response, and they instantly jump into the critical parent state. They lash out and say, you never listen to me. You care more about that stupid phone than you do about this relationship.
Which immediately triggers partner B's defensive child state.
Yes. Partner B feels attacked, their prefrontal cortex shuts down, and they fire back.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if you didn't nag me the second I sat down, I'd actually want to talk to you.
And now they're off to the races.
Exactly. Now they're in a screaming match about an argument they had 3 Thanksgivings ago.
Yeah.
The original present moment issue partner, a feeling unheard, is entirely lost.
And the payoff is they both get to feel self-righteous, collect some negative strokes, and completely avoid the terrifying vulnerability of genuine intimacy.
A perfect execution of the game. So how do we reprogram that moment? What is the specific adult state intervention to drop the rope?
Right, what's the actual phrase?
In the adult state, partner A uses their prefrontal cortex to observe their own emotional reaction without letting it hijack their mouth. They pause, regulate their nervous system, and state.
Yeah.
When I was talking about my stressful meeting, you kept looking at your phone. I felt like my words weren't important to you.
Okay, I want to break down why that specific sentence structure is practically bulletproof. It relies on 2 very specific things: observable facts and subjective emotional experience.
Yes.
Like, when you kept looking at your phone, that is an empirical, observable fact. It is not an accusation of you never listen, which is an absolute that can be easily debated. And then I felt like my words weren't important. That is, taking ownership of an internal state, not attacking the other person's character.
It is brilliant because it leaves 0 room for a counterattack. It disarms the entire game. If partner A says, you never listen, partner B can just argue the data. I listened to you for an hour yesterday. But if partner A says, I felt unimportant in that moment, partner B literally cannot argue with subjective reality. You can't tell someone, no, you didn't feel that way. This adult communication forces the issue to remain entirely in the present. It invites connection instead of declaring war.
It forces the other person out of their defensive posture and invites them to respond from their own adult state. But we have to acknowledge how incredibly difficult this is to execute in real time. Like, in the heat of the moment, when your amygdala is flooded with cortisol, everything in your biology wants to scream and blame and fight.
It is incredibly difficult, and
Yeah.
it's compounded by our societal conditioning. We are taught from a very young age to suppress genuine vulnerability, right? We're
Right.
told, don't let them see you cry or always project strength.
Just push it all down.
We push our genuine emotions, the fear, the sadness, the inadequacy completely underground. But emotions do not vanish just because they are repressed. They fester, they mutate, and they eventually manifest as manipulative psychological games. We play games because we are just too terrified to look at another human being and say, I am hurting.
The metacognition required here really reminds me of being in a movie theater.
How so?
Have you ever been watching a really intense thriller and you're totally gripped by it? Your heart rate is elevated, your palms are sweating, you are genuinely terrified of the villain on the screen, you're completely lost in the narrative.
Sure.
But then for a split second, you notice the green exit sign glowing in the corner of the room, or you hear the air conditioner hum, and suddenly your brain shifts states. You remember, oh right, I'm just sitting in a chair in a mall looking at projected light.
Oh, that's good.
The movie hasn't changed. The villain is still on screen doing terrible things. But your terror just vanishes instantly because you realize it's a projection.
That is a phenomenal analogy for achieving the adult state.
Mm-hmm.
The psychological game is the movie. Your life script is the screenplay. When you are unconsciously caught up in it, the drama and the anger feel like absolute inevitable reality.
Right.
But the moment you engage your prefrontal cortex, the moment you spot the exit sign, you realize you are an observer, not a victim. You realize, oh, my amygdala is running the failure script right now. I am actively trying to provoke my boss to get a negative stroke. That simple realization neutralizes the power of the whole game.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to visualize that one specific person in your life who always manages to trigger a fight with you. You know, the one who knows the exact cheat codes to bypass your logic and infuriate you.
We all have one.
What happens the next time they say that provocative thing? And instead of pulling the rope, you just look at them, maintain your adult state, and state an objective fact about how their words made you feel. What happens if you simply refuse to participate in the script? It is terrifying because it requires you to drop your armor, but it is an absolute superpower.
It is a superpower because it forces reality into the room. It shatters the illusion of the game completely. But we do have to address the void this creates.
The void.
Yes. Dropping the rope is merely stopping a negative behavior. And nature abhors a vacuum. If we strip away the games and the scripts and the negative strokes, what are we actually supposed to replace them with?
Right, which is where we reach the pinnacle of Berne's framework. The goal isn't just conflict avoidance, it is true psychological freedom. And this freedom is supported by three distinct pillars: awareness, spontaneity, and intimacy. Let's unpack what a life actually looks like when it's built on these three pillars.
These three pillars really represent the highest form of human functioning. We've touched on awareness. It's the capacity to perceive the present environment directly, without that distorted, smudged lens of early childhood conditioning.
Right.
It's the ability to hear a bird sing or read a text message and experience it as a present moment phenomenon, rather than overlaying it with the ghosts of your past.
So awareness is knowing that a delayed email is literally just a delayed email. It is not an indictment of your fundamental worth as a human being.
Correct. The second pillar is spontaneity. Now, in everyday conversation, spontaneity usually means recklessness or impulsiveness.
Like booking a flight to Vegas at 2 a.m.
Exactly. But in this psychological framework, spontaneity is the absolute freedom to choose your reaction. It is liberation from the compulsion to play games.
Oh, I see.
It means you can deliberately choose to respond from your adult, your parent, or your child state, based on what the present moment actually requires, rather than being forced into a state by an unconscious trigger.
You are no longer an actor reciting lines from a tragedy written 20 years ago. You are improvising your life in real time.
Exactly. Which brings us to the third, most profound, and honestly most difficult pillar: intimacy.
When people hear the word intimacy, they immediately default to romance or physical closeness, right? But Berne defines intimacy much more broadly and notes that it is astonishingly rare.
Psychologically speaking, intimacy is the rarest form of human connection. It occurs when two individuals meet without masks, without games, without ulterior motives, and without exploiting each other for psychological payoffs.
No hidden agendas.
None. It is the collision of two pure adult states, infused with the uninhibited joy and vulnerability of the healthy child state, interacting entirely in the present moment.
It basically requires dropping the avatars. Because most of the time, we never actually interact with other people. We only interact with their roles.
Yes.
The manager talks to the employee. The perfect mother talks to the rebellious team. The tough guy talks to the people pleaser. It is just two algorithms pinging each other.
And managing those algorithms, maintaining those heavy avatars, is why modern life feels so chronically exhausting for so many people. But when true intimacy is achieved, psychological games just dissolve organically.
He says you don't need them anymore.
Exactly. Games are merely a desperate, manipulative strategy to get your emotional needs, your strokes met, when direct communication feels too dangerous. If you are experiencing genuine intimacy, your need to be seen, heard, and valued is being met directly.
You don't need to play why don't you, yes. But to get attention, if you can just look at your friend and say, I am feeling incredibly lost today, can you just sit with me? And have that vulnerable request actually honored.
Yes, that is the core of it.
That sounds incredibly peaceful. But I do want to inject some realism here. Does achieving this state of awareness, spontaneity, and intimacy mean you achieve, enlightenment? Does it mean you never have a misunderstanding or a fight again?
Not at all. And striving for that is a dangerous utopian fantasy. Psychological freedom does not mean a life devoid of conflict or grief or anger.
Right.
It means that when conflict does arise, you deal with the actual conflict happening in the present moment. You don't weaponize it with decades of historical baggage. You respond to the reality of the situation, rather than reacting to a perceived existential threat.
It means taking full ownership of your emotional state rather than manipulating others to regulate it for you. I just keep thinking about the sheer physical relief of dropping the avatar, like pretending to be stoic when you are actually terrified, pretending to be hyper-competent when you are drowning, pretending to be unbothered when you are deeply wounded. It takes a massive amount of caloric energy to keep that script running.
So much energy.
True spontaneity sounds like taking a machine learning model that has been rigidly optimizing for survival its whole life and finally allowing it to just explore.
It is the realization that the heavy armor you built to survive your childhood is now the very thing preventing you from actually living your adulthood.
Wow.
You are an adult now. You possess the neurological hardware to protect yourself in the present. You no longer need the armor, and you no longer need the script.
Let's take a breath and integrate this massive journey we've been on today. We started by discovering the invisible games running beneath our daily conversations, realizing that our vocabulary is often just a Trojan horse for hidden emotional transactions.
And we examine the neurological realities of our internal voices, the structural pathology of the parent, the adult, and the child, and saw how allowing the limbic system to hijack the prefrontal cortex leads to total interpersonal disaster.
We decoded the anatomy of games like Yes, But, and explored the biological imperative of strokes, recognizing that our brains will actively seek out the misery of negative attention because it prefers the safety of the familiar over the void of being ignored.
We confronted the reality of our life scripts, those deeply embedded algorithms written before we were even 7 years old, which dictate our self-sabotage and force us to bend reality to match our childhood conclusions.
And finally, we learned the mechanics of dropping the rope. We learned how to formulate adult-to-adult communication, how to spot the exit sign in the theater of our own minds, and how to strive for the ultimate goals of awareness, spontaneity, and game-free intimacy.
It is a profound neurological and psychological shift. It moves you from being a passive victim of your early programming to being the conscious architect of your present reality.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final practical thought to carry into your actual life today, into your next meeting, your next family dinner, your next argument. We established today that every single time you interact with another human being, you are doing one of two things. You are either unconsciously reinforcing the tragic algorithm of your childhood, or you are consciously writing a new one.
The stakes of a simple conversation are truly that profound.
So the next time you feel that irresistible magnetic urge to say yes, but, or the next time you feel that familiar spike of cortisol and anger starting to brew with your partner over something completely trivial, I want you to pause. Look for the exit sign. Engage your prefrontal cortex and ask yourself a very simple question. Who is actually speaking right now? Is it the conscious, objective, adult version of you living in the present moment? Or is it a ghost from your past, desperately playing a game you forgot how to quit?
Because the moment you can observe the game is over,
Mm.
and real life begins.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of the mind. Step out of the invisible theater, drop the script, and start living genuinely. We'll see you next time.